I was standing in line at the passport office, staring at the cracked tiles under my feet, when I heard a familiar voice, the same one that used to break into shouting 5 years ago, but once sounded like home. "Mike," came softly from behind me. I turned around. She was 3 people back, wearing a caramel-colored coat with faint lines by her eyes, not from time but from laughter I used to cause. Sarah, my ex-wife. 15 years of marriage, 5 years of silence. And now, a passport office in Seattle, the smell of old paper, a slow-moving line, and the past breathing right in my face again. "Sarah!" The word got stuck somewhere between surprise and a strange kind of warmth. "Didn't think we'd ever cross paths again." "And you look good," she smiled, though her eyes stayed cautious. I wanted to joke, but something tightened inside. For a second, I thought I could smell our old kitchen, coffee, burnt toast, and her favorite lemons. The line moved slowly. We stood in silence for a few minutes until a woman at the counter started arguing with the clerk, and that little burst of chaos, that hum of voices, it somehow gave us permission to speak again. "How are you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I'm good," she shrugged. "Got a husband now, a daughter, she's 2. You probably—" "Yeah, married, a son, he's 3. And for some reason, I wanted to add, "You'd like him." We both laughed, quiet, awkward, and something in that laughter melted away. When she stepped up to the window, I caught myself watching the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the same small gesture that used to drive me crazy. After the line, she was waiting by the exit. I stopped in front of her, not knowing what to say. She broke the silence first. "You know, there's a cafe around the corner, and I've got about an hour before my husband gets off work. Maybe we could just have a coffee, no strings." I nodded. We walked side by side down Pine Street, painfully familiar. Once we used to stroll here on Sundays with the dogs, arguing over who'd buy the ice cream. Now we were 2 strangers who didn't know where to begin. "Remember our first year in this city?" she said, as if reading my thoughts. "We lived in that tiny loft above the auto shop. Yeah, it always smelled like gasoline, but you said it was the smell of adventure." "I still believed in adventure back then," she said, and her voice wavered just a little. We sat by the window in the cafe. She stirred her cappuccino carefully. I noticed her hands trembling slightly. "I hated you for a long time, Mike," she said suddenly. "Not because you left, but because I couldn't understand why we fell apart. We were a team." "We really were a team," I said, and then didn't know what else to add. She smiled, and for the first time, there was calm in her eyes. Then, somehow naturally, we left the cafe and walked on, down toward the waterfront. The city buzzed, indifferent to us, and we, for the first time in years, were walking side by side again. And then she stumbled on the uneven pavement, and I managed to catch her by the elbow. Her hand brushed mine, briefly, like a spark, but that touch knocked the air out of me. "Careful," I said. I always forget to watch my step. Maybe that's why, back then, I didn't watch my step in our life, either. I couldn't find an answer, so I just smiled, painfully, awkwardly. We kept walking in silence, and something began to rise inside me. Not regret, not love, but something deeper. A quiet realization that time doesn't erase people, it just teaches them to breathe differently. And then, among the noise of traffic and the scent of rain, I understood. This meeting wasn't an accident. We walked along the waterfront where the wind from the bay lifted Sarah's hair, and the boats on the water rocked gently, like old memories that refused to sink. The sky was slowly dimming, and through the thin mist, the lights of evening Seattle began to break through. The same lights we used to watch from the roof of our loft, wrapped in an old blanket, believing that life would always be that simple. "Strange," Sarah said, stopping by the railing. "I walk here almost every day, but today it feels different." "Because I'm here," I smiled. Still self-absorbed as ever, she snorted, but her eyes shimmered with warmth. "And yet, maybe you're a little right." We stood there, side by side, looking at the water. The wind chased small ripples across the surface, and suddenly I remembered how we used to argue about who would teach our unborn child to swim. That child never came, and we never spoke of it again. I felt words rising to my throat, but Sarah spoke first. "I couldn't forgive myself for that loss for a long time," she said quietly. "You just shut down. You didn't say a word, and I just wanted you to cry just once." I swallowed the air like knives. "I did cry," I said after a pause, "just not then, and not next to you." She looked at me, for a long time, without blame, without regret. "Maybe if we hadn't stayed silent back then, things would have turned out differently." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe we just never learned how to talk when it really hurt." We kept walking. The air smelled of coffee from street cafes, wet asphalt and distant rain. Sarah walked beside me, without touching, but I could feel her steps, like a pulse, like the echo of the life we once shared. At the corner of Pike and Fifth, she suddenly stopped. "Remember that old bookstore? We used to come here every Saturday." "Miller's Books?" I smiled. "You'd buy a new book every time and never finish it. I just loved the smell of the pages and the quiet. We used to be silent together a lot, but it was a good kind of silence." We went inside. The store hadn't changed much. Wooden shelves, warm lamplight, the soft rustle of pages. I watched Sarah run her fingers along the spines of books as if they were something sacred. And then, out of nowhere, the shopkeeper, old Miller, still alive, gray-haired but unmistakably him, recognized us. "Well, I'll be damned," he exclaimed. "The Andersons! I thought you two moved away years ago." Sarah and I exchanged a glance. Something sharp twisted inside me. The Andersons. "We're not together anymore," she said quietly. Miller looked embarrassed, mumbled an apology, and disappeared into the back room. "The Andersons," I repeated. "Sounds strange now." "Doesn't feel strange to me," Sarah said. "Maybe because part of me is still there, in those 15 years. We stepped back out onto the street. Twilight had swallowed the city, but the light from the shop windows painted warm patches across the wet pavement. We walked in silence until I finally asked, "Sarah, are you happy now?" She thought for a moment. "I think so. I've got a good family, a job, a home, but there are days when I wake up and think about you, not as love, but as a part of myself I somehow lost." I nodded. "It's the same for me. I love my wife, truly, but sometimes, when I see her get mad over little things, I catch myself remembering how you used to throw a towel at me when I left my socks on the couch, and I smile." Sarah laughed, but her eyes shittered with tears. "You know," she said, "I used to think we were enemies. Turns out we were just an unfinished story. Maybe every love is just a story you eventually have to learn how to end," I said. We reached the intersection where our favorite food truck used to be. Now there was a new cafe with a sign that read, "New Chapter." I looked at her and said, "Fitting, isn't it?" She smiled. "You still know how to find meaning in coincidences." We stopped at the crosswalk. The light blinked green. And then, as if some old impulse between us had woken up, Sarah said, "Let's walk a bit more. Just walk. No plans, no destination, like we used to." I agreed. We headed down the street that led to the park where we'd taken our first photo together. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew this walk wasn't about memories. It was about forgiveness. But I didn't yet know that by the end of the evening, Sarah would say something that would change everything I thought I knew about our past. The park was almost empty. Autumn was spilling gold from the trees. The wind carried the scent of wet leaves and old benches. Sarah and I walked slowly, and I could feel the evening thickening around us, like a spider web about to break under the weight of one too heavy word. In the spot where our old bench used to be, there was now a new metal chair. I almost joked that everything old eventually disappears, but she spoke first. Do you ever think about how things might have turned out if we hadn't split up? I didn't answer right away. I did. For a long time I did. She sat down. I sat beside her. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The streetlights cast a soft glow across the pavement, and around us settled a silence that smelled like the past. People often asked me why we divorced, Sarah said, staring into the darkness. And I never know what to tell them. It's not like there was one reason. We just stopped seeing each other. Maybe, I nodded, we were looking at life from opposite sides of the same window. She suddenly turned to me. Do you remember when I went to stay with my sister in Vancouver? Yeah, you didn't answer my calls. I thought that was the end. Sarah took a deep breath, like she was preparing to jump. I found out I was pregnant then. I felt my heart stop. The world seemed to shift a few inches to the side. What? Yes. Her voice was even, almost calm. I didn't tell you. I was scared. After what we went through before, I couldn't handle it. And when I had the miscarriage, I decided it would be better if you never knew. I sat in silence. Only 2 words echoed in my head. Another child. Another chance I never even knew existed. Sarah went on. I carried that with me for a long time. And today, when I saw you in that line, I realized I didn't want to keep any lies between us anymore. You deserve to know everything. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, I managed to breathe out, "Thank you for telling me. It hurts, but it's honest." We sat quietly. I looked at her hands. The same hands that once held my face when I couldn't hold myself together. And suddenly I understood. We both survived. Each in our own pain, in our own way. Sarah stood up, looked toward the sky, where a single star was breaking through the clouds. You know, Mike, I'm not angry anymore, and I don't regret it. We were good to each other when we could be. And that's enough. I stood up beside her. You gave me 15 years, Sarah. That's more than most people get in a lifetime. She smiled, genuinely, with the calmness of adulthood. And you gave me faith that love really exists, even if it's not forever. We hugged. No passion, no longing. Just 2 people who had been through everything and remained grateful. The rain began to fall, softly, like a blessing. She buried her face in my shoulder and whispered, "You were a good man, just not completely mine." "And you were my universe," I replied, "until I learned how to live on the ground." We stood in the rain until it turned into a full-on downpour. Then she said, "I have to go. My daughter's waiting." "Go," I nodded. "I've got somewhere to be too." She took a few steps, then turned back. "Mike, thank you for everything that was. And you, Sarah," I said, "for teaching me how to let go." She walked away. Her silhouette slowly dissolved into the rain, like a scene fading into the next frame. I stood there for a long time as the sky swallowed the last traces of the day. My phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. A message from my wife. "Our son needs help with homework. "When will you be home?" I smiled. "I'm going home." And for the first time in years, that word felt real again.